great to see you in the chat. Thank you very much, everyone. Great. Okay, I think looking at the numbers, it's definitely slowing down now. So, right, we'll get started, I think. There's still a few more joining, but bore da, croeso cynnes, diolch yn fawr am ddod. Peter Thomas ydw i, a dwi'n bennaeth sgiliau a gallu digidol yn y Canolfan. Good morning, a very warm welcome. Thank you for giving up some time to join us here today. Peter Thomas is my name. I'm Head of Digital Skills and Capability here. And I'm fascinated by the world of AI and the potential that it offers. So this webinar, just to make sure, is all about artificial intelligence. Hopefully you can see that up on the screen there, and meeting the public sector equality duty. I've mentioned it, but if you've only just arrived, please say hello in the chat. Dwedwch wrthom ni pwy ydych chi, ble ydych chi'n dod, defnyddio'r sgwrs drwy draw. Keep using the chat all the way through, please, and talk to us all the way. Build up some questions, and we'll try and answer those as we go. We will be recording the session today. In fact, we are live now recording the session, so hopefully that's all okay. The only one visible at the moment is me, and it will be our presenters, so please use the chat to ask away. Okay, right. Numbers seem to be still going up a little bit, but I'm going to get going. So the topic today is a fascinating topic. AI is incredibly exciting, and anybody who knows me knows I use that word regularly, but in particular around this area, I think everyone will agree AI is causing waves. It offers the potential to be truly transformational in just about every aspect of daily life, but we must also be very cognizant of the risks, arguably even more so if we're responsible for delivering public services. So it includes the potential for increasing inequalities. There are issues possibly with privacy, discrimination, and human rights. So it's really, really important to understand that AI is entirely reliant on data. Data is created by people, and people, whether intentionally or not, are often susceptible to bias. So that's why the public sector equality duty and the work undertaken by Ginger and the team at EHRC is so incredibly important. It's going to help guide us in our planning for the responsible use of AI. That's the crucial bit. And also to understand some of the real world impacts in doing so. So dwi'n mynd I drosglwyddo I Ginger I ddechrau, ac yna byddwn ni'n clywed gan Claire. So I'm going to hand over to Ginger in a moment, and Ginger will begin the presentation, and we'll hear from Claire, her colleague, and we will be back, or I will be back at the end to try and tackle some of the questions. So sit back, make sure you've got a cup of coffee in your hand, and I'll hand over to Ginger now. Bore da, Ginger, good morning, welcome.
Bore da, good morning. So happy to see everyone here. Thank you so much for your time today. So I suppose most of you have heard of EHRC, but just in case, we are Great Britain's national equality body and the statutory regulator for equality issues. We're also a national human rights institution with A status accreditation from the United Nations. Our mission is to create a fairer and more equal society. So I'm Ginger Wiegand, and I'm from EHRC's Wales team. I'm co-presenting with my colleague Claire Lesko, who is with who leads our Great Britain compliance work relating to artificial intelligence. I'm delighted to be here today to share some of our work on AI and the public sector equality duty, or as we often call it, the PSED. So I'd say that today is very much an overview and just an introduction. What we really want to do is drive you to the different guidance that we talk about today, particularly our AI PSED guidance, so that you have a closer look. My email will come up at the end. Do feel free to contact me if you have further questions. I might not have answers or be able to answer everyone, but I'll do my level best to connect you with a resource that's appropriate. Okay, so though today's focus is on AI, I'd also say many of the concepts and concerns that we reference today may generally apply to other digital projects or digital transformation projects, whether or not they involve AI. Next slide. So here's a bit of an intro, the structure of our presentation. I will start with some background concerns about equality and artificial intelligence, then talk about EHRC's role in this space and give a very brief overview of the public sector equality duty. Then Claire will very briefly run you through what is in our AI and PSED guidance, which you can find on our website. The links will be posted in the chat. For anyone watching on YouTube later, the links will be posted in the description of the YouTube video. Claire will go on to present findings from a recent deep dive to look at how local authorities in England and Scotland are using AI and the steps they're taking to meet the requirements of the public sector equality duty. The Wales team didn't take part in that deep dive because our intelligence suggested that there's not widespread use of AI in the public sector here yet, apart perhaps from certain pockets. But I will say that we can apply learning from that deep dive as we move forward in Wales and across the different, there is learning to be had from that deep dive across different parts of the public sector as well, we believe. So my section is going to be mostly explanatory, but Claire's will include ample examples, and then we'll hand back to CPDS for Q&A. Next slide, please. Okay, so we gave some of you, we gave out with the joining instructions and a little pre-survey for the webinar. 30 people completed that survey, and we just wanted to share with you the results. We asked how confident people were in their knowledge of the public sector equality duty. And we got an answer of 3 out of 5, which actually is pretty, you know, it's a pretty, I guess that would be fair, a fair knowledge. We also asked how confident people felt that they're able to consider the equality impacts of artificial intelligence. And in that, we got an average answer of 2.3 out of 5, with 1 being not confident and 5 being very confident. Next slide, please. We also asked, is your organization currently using AI? And we found that of the 30 organizations, 13 said yes, 11 said no, and 8 said don't know. And in fact, in some of our findings, which Claire will go on to talk about later, the don't know is a bit of a theme. Next slide, please. And then here, I'm not going to talk through this entire slide, but just give you a few seconds to read it and you can get a flavor. We asked if you are using AI and what application. So we got a range of different answers here, some using ChatGPT, an answer about use in patients monitoring health. If you could take a second right now, if you didn't complete the pre-survey, we'd be interested to know if your organization is currently or thinking about using AI, and if so, in what application. So as we move on, we'd appreciate it if you could share that in the chat. We'll also have a poll at the end, and you can share that answer in that too. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just so why this topic? Just a tiny bit of a very introductory background. So EHRCs, in our 2022 to 2025 strategic plan, we set equality impacts of emerging technology and digital exclusion as a new priority. AI and new digital technologies are transforming how public bodies how public services are delivered. They have the potential to improve equality. Our guidance reflects this, we think, but they may also lead to discrimination. Several inquiries and reports express concern that some public bodies are using artificial intelligence systems that may lead to discriminatory decision-making, and that they may not always be easy to understand how, when, or where the discrimination is occurring. So discrimination may happen because the training data or the data that's used to help the AI make decisions contains bias. Likewise, bias may result from the decisions made by the people, the humans developing, training, or using the AI. So sometimes that bias may exist in the initial training data set. Sometimes that bias may develop and accumulate over time as the system is used. Equally, it's not always easy for members of the public to know how or when AI is being used to make important decisions that impact them. And therefore, it could be even harder to access redress if their rights have been breached because they just don't know what has happened to them. There are concerns that public bodies don't always know when they are using AI, or that they don't provide sufficient attention to the equality impacts or understand the range of equality impacts of digital technology. When Claire talks about what we found in our deep dive, she'll get into that issue in a bit more detail. Just to reflect that last point I made, about the attention to the equality impacts of artificial intelligence or digital technology. When we started this new strategic plan in spring of 2022, EHRC, the Wales team commissioned research. We commissioned Warwick University to do some desktop research. They reviewed the published strategic equality plans of all 44 listed bodies in Wales, and none of those strategic equality plans referred to AI or in fact made any reference to digital matters at all. So it doesn't mean that those digital teams aren't thinking about, or the equality teams aren't thinking about equality when they undertake their work, but it does mean that perhaps it's not reflected as a strategic priority in the corporate plan, or at least not in the published corporate plan. So our aim today is to highlight the importance of addressing equality impact, and then also of artificial intelligence, and then to link you with resources that could help you going forward. Next slide, please. So what is EHRC's role in this place? I'm going to talk about our regulatory model, but our role in this space is to make sure that duty bearers have access to the right information and support to ensure that where they use AI, they do so in ways that comply with equality and human rights law, and to monitor how AI is being used and intervene where necessary. We also recognize the need to work with other regulators, such as the Information Commissioner's Office where needed. This graphic depicts our end-to-end regulatory model. So EHRC has a range of powers on a continuum from prevention to remedial action. We might evidence issues, for instance, through undertaking research or undertaking inquiries where we understand more about equality impacts of a particular topic and then put ourselves in a position to make recommendations. We could ensure compliance with standards by providing advice and guidance, such as the PSED AI guidance we'll show you today, or if need be, potentially entering agreements or action plans with specific organizations, on up to enforcing the law through legal cases. We do monitor, enforce, and regulate. We do monitor, regulate, and enforce the public sector equality duty. Wales does have a public sector equality duty monitoring program, and the findings from the AI PSED deep dive, which Claire will talk about, will inform our future monitoring plans. Next slide, please. So what is the public sector equality duty? So the PSED requires public bodies to think about equality across their work. So it is part of the Equality Act 2010, so it is a legal obligation, but I would stress the PSED can be a tool, and meeting the PSED involves steps that can help build confidence within your organization and outside your organization when designing or implementing new services, new technology, or new policies. So it is designed to deliver transformational change. It recognizes that organizations that think about the needs of all service users deliver better services. It absolutely does apply to commission services and is about transparency and accountability. And I would just say that the language that I'm using here, it actually reminds me of the language that we see in some of the digital public service standards, particularly language around meeting service users' needs. Here we're talking about ensuring that you meet the needs of groups of people with protected characteristics and really look at all those different groups, as well as ethics and transparency. Next slide, please. Okay. So the PSED has a general duty as well as specific duties. The general duty sets out what public bodies in Wales need to consider when making decisions and developing policies that affect staff and service users with different protected characteristics. So all public bodies in Britain must give due regard to these three aims that are at the top of the slide: eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment, and victimization, advance equality of opportunity between groups, and foster good relations between groups. So most are familiar with the first aim, or that's the first thing that pops into your mind when you think about the PSED, don't discriminate. But I just want to point out that the second two aims are are positive duties, and they're about trying to expand equality of opportunity. They are equally important, and we want public bodies in Wales to think about these second two aims when they're thinking about applying the PSED to their work. The PSED does cover 9 protected characteristics. They're all listed in the guidance. Examples of protected characteristic are race or ethnicity, age or disability, among others. And I just want to point out one more time, a public body cannot delegate responsibility to external organizations that are carrying out public functions on their behalf. So if you are commissioning technology or technology services, it's very important to keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So the purpose of Wales-specific duties is to help your performance of the general equality duty. There are a range of specific duties. Some include engaging with groups with protected characteristics, ensuring that procurement drives equality for certain contracts, setting equality objectives in an organization. Digital teams even might think about setting equality objectives for themselves, which are based on evidence about your particular constituency. And equality impact assessments is one particular requirement of Wales-specific duties. So equality impact assessments are about using the most relevant evidence to make a decision and talking to people with lived experience in each protected characteristic group about how the change you're proposing or the service or technology you're proposing to roll out will impact on them. We really want public bodies to see that complying with the specific duties is not simply administrative processes and procedures. It's about generating positive equality outcomes. Next slide, please. So EHRC does have helpful guidance. CPDS is posting links to the guidances on this slide here in the chat. And for you YouTube viewers watching afterwards, they will be included in the description. The top two are guidance that are more general guidance about the PSED. Our essential guide, which is an overview for listed public bodies in Wales about the public sector equality duty. And then our more detailed technical guidance to the PSED in Wales. I would just note that the technical guidance was updated in March 2023 and is the most up to date. I am going to hand over now to Claire, who will take you through EHRC's AI PSED guidance we published last year. I would note that it contains information and steps that are relevant to meeting both the general and specific duties, and it's useful for Wales public bodies or teams who need to, for instance, complete equality impact assessments for specific initiatives or meet other aspects of that duty. I just note that likewise, Claire's AI PSED deep dive work has already been picked up and reported on by various news stories. And the fact that we are monitoring how public bodies are using AI is helping to promote greater awareness about the need for compliance. Thank you, and on to Claire.
Boda, bonjour, and hello from London. As Ginger said, I'm going to start with presenting to you a bit on the content of the PSED and AI guidance. It's mainly relevant to public body across Great Britain, and we published that last September, so about a year ago now. Hopefully, some of you will have seen it, and you will have seen that it's short and easy to understand. And really, the point of this guidance was to provide knowledge to AI experts who don't have a lot of expertise on equality, and likewise to provide AI knowledge to equality experts, because we found that usually those two groups of people was lacking knowledge in both. It starts with an introduction to AI, what we mean by AI. It follows with section 1, which presents the risk and benefits of AI, including how AI may lead to discrimination or deepen inequality, which Ginger referred to. Section 2 provides an overview of the PSED general duty and specific duty in England, Scotland, and Wales, and it includes case study, at this stage, fictive case study, and we hope to remedy that shortly. And then section 3 is for England, or was produced for England mainly, because in England we do not have a specific duty to conduct equality impact assessment. It's more loose. So we provided a 10-step checklist for public body to consider equality impact at key stages when using AI. We do have feedback from Welsh stakeholders, though, that this is a really useful checklist for them. So I would encourage you to look at that. Next slide, please. As Ginger said, I led a deep dive, a monitoring project to look at how a local authority and public body more broadly were thinking about equality when commissioning and using AI. And that's what I'm going to present to you now. I'm going to present the finding and then a couple of good practice case studies that we are putting together. Next slide, please. So the project scope was Scotland and England, because as Ginger said, Wales at the time did not find a lot of evidence of public body in Wales using AI. So we focus on those two countries, but the finding we've got would be useful to Wales moving forward. What was this project about? Well, the first aim was to try to identify good practice, case studies that we could share with others. And in fact, we did identify elements of good practice that we are working on now to produce as case studies next year. We also wanted to identify barriers to compliance to the PSCD and try to understand how we and others could work to help public body address those barriers. Just to say that in Scotland, they broadened the scope, which they didn't focus on local authority because they didn't find that lots of local authority were using AI. So they look at public body more generally. How did we go about getting evidence? We sent an information request to 22 local authority in England, and we've got a very good response rate, so very rich information from that. We follow up with correspondence to get more detail on their practice and sometimes to challenge responses. And by this, I mean, it was interesting to see that some of you do not know whether you are using AI or not, because it was the case for us when we wrote to local authorities saying, want to know about your use of AI. They told us we're not using AI. And we had to go back to them saying, yes, so we do have evidence that you've been using AI. And then they just realized that they were using AI. So I think there is a lot of issue there with what people understand to be AI. We also conducted certain interviews with local authority in England when we felt they were demonstrating or could demonstrate good practice. In Scotland, they had a similar approach. They interviewed 6 public body. They also had meeting with AI expert and sectoral equality network. Next slide, please. So the first hurdle on this project was to actually define AI. We talked to a lot of AI experts, and they told us that we needed to be really mindful on our definition of AI when we communicated with public body, because it's really difficult. People may not use the word AI. They may use words such as algorithm, computing technology, not realizing that this is AI. So what we did, and I put a word cloud here on the slide just to give you synonyms of AI that people may use and not really recognize as AI. So that's the first hurdle for us and lots of people out there, is to understand that all those words means AI. So what we did is use a general definition made of synonyms of AI that people may recognize, and then in discussion with experts, we also identified 3 types of AI most likely used by local authority. And I put those 3 types on the slide. The first one was predictive analytical tools. So we're talking about algorithm there that's link data together, may help you to give you a risk factor, for example, risk factor in relations to people at risk of homelessness, rent area, financial hardship, or benefit frauds. The second type of AI which local authority may be using is remote monitoring tool and smart technology, sometimes referred to as technology-enabled care. Here we're talking about sensors that may be put in people's home to track movements, to find out whether they are moving out of bed, opening the curtain, going to the toilet as expected, so to inform social care really. We're talking also about technologies that will remind you to take your medicines or go to appointments or carry out daily tasks. And the third types of technology we listed were community AI tool. Here we're talking chatbots, we're talking automatic language translation. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to present to you the finding from our deep dive, and those findings are really key for us across Britain to inform what we could do with them to help public body do better on the PSCD. Next slide, please. My first slide is on general finding, and the first things to say is we found example of council or public body piloting or using all three types of AI technology I presented on the previous slide, so that's a finding in itself. And it's interesting because colleagues in Scotland and us work separately, but we ended up with the same finding, which is a finding in itself for us. We've got same issue in England and Scotland, and I think it's probably valid to Wales too. The first things we found is most local authority commission out AI technology to private sector company. And overall, there is a cautious approach. Many councils are piloting technology before deciding whether or not to mainstream it. So I think it's good to see that organizations are mindful of using AI and really thinking through whether or not it benefits them and the residents. Most local authorities appear to use AI, including predictive analytical tech, to benefit the citizen. So to prevent upstream issue from developing, i.e. to try to help people before they become homeless. I guess the exception to that is the so-called risk-based verification, which is an AI tech that was promoted by the DWP to local authority to identify potential benefit fraud. So definitely not at the benefits of individual here, but to society. Next slide, please. I've got a couple of slides on transparency and accountability, and Ginger said very clearly that the PSED is all about transparency and accountability. So the first finding to be mindful of here is because there is no set of definition of AI, some local authority did not recognize that they were using AI, sometimes not at all, and we had to challenge that, as I said before. And sometimes it was more a case of we are using some algorithm that provide us with risk rating on different people, but a human is involved in the final decision making, therefore it's not really AI. Well, it is AI. It does have an element of AI. So there is a lot of problem with what is and what is not AI, and I think we've got a lot of work to do to have a common definition. The second finding is most local authorities do not appear to communicate the use of AI and its potential effects to members of the public. We found some exception to that. We're trying to build case study around that. But there is a problem here with transparency. And following on to that, we asked local authority, have you received any complaint about your use of AI? And surprise, surprise, no one has received any complaint, which is, you know, it's not a surprise given that nobody knows that AI is used in the area. Next slide, please. Another important findings, and this is something I keep reading in the literature out there, is public bodies told us that private sector providers of AI did not share how the tech was working due to commercial sensitivity, which is all well and good, but as Ginger said, the PSED is non-delegable, i.e. if you commission out one of your public function or a tech, then the buck stop with you if you are challenged because you end up being discriminatory against people. So we are in a situation where there is opacity around how the AI tech works, is built, you know, the data set it's trained on. And that means that local authorities are not currently able to really consider the PSED as they should do. And that raises a lot of issue for us because it may lead to unintended consequences, including discrimination. But this is something that we need to really tackle. Next slide, please. Now we look at equality consideration that council and public body were making when commissioning AI, and no surprise, most local authorities do not appear to build equality consideration in the procurement process as we would expect them to. By this, I mean, most council told us, yes, we are asking AI private sector providers if they've got an equality policy in relation to their employees, is that defining breach of the Equality Act 2010, and that's about it. So it's very sort of general. It's got nothing to do with the AI tech itself that council may want to commission. So there is a lot of issue there, and many public bodies told us that they needed to make progress in this area and welcome guidance from us. That some of them also told us that it'd be good for us to work with others, Crown Commercial Services and other ICO, Information Commissioner Office, to try to put together clear and practical question they could ask on equality as part of the procurement process of AI, and perhaps also equality standards they could build into the contract. And this is something we are exploring now. I think it's a crucial issue, given that most local authorities are commissioning the AI tech. Next slide, please. Now, I wanted to look at equality consideration when local authority or public body were using AI. And the first finding is there is out there the word used out there. It's about ethics. It's not equality. And this sort of semantic create confusion amongst local authority on what needs to be done. And so when we ask local authority, can you show us the equality consideration you have made, equality impact assessment? The answer was usually, yes, we've done a data protection impact assessment, which is all about how to deal with individual data. It's got nothing to do really with the equality implication of using an AI tech. And if you look at the data protection impact assessment template, you will see that there is consideration of whether an AI tech may lead to discrimination and bias, which is great to see. But that only relates to the first aim of the PSCD, eliminate discrimination. And it's only in relation to the negative impact an AI tech may have. There is no consideration at the moment on how an AI technology could help you advance equality of opportunity or foster good relation. And this is really an oversight that needs to be addressed. AI is not to be used in a way that will not discriminate. That's only part of the story. It should be used to advance equality of opportunity and foster good relation as well. Next slide, please. To finish on this topic, I just wanted to highlight to you that local authority and public body appear to trigger consideration of whether the AI techs they are using may lead to discrimination or bias only when they or the contractor plan to process what is called special category data. And that's an issue because one, age and sex are not special category data, therefore there is a lack of consideration there. And also, there are proxy data, such as postcode, for example, that would be part of more general data, not special category data. And therefore, if you think about it in a lot of areas, postcode could be a proxy for race. And because postcode is not special category data, there is no consideration of discrimination and bias. And that could lead to really important unforeseen consequences. And I will present to you on my last slide an example from the Netherlands when this happened. Next slide, please. Before I go on to the bad, what happened in Netherlands, I wanted to present to you a couple of good practice elements that we found out of the deep dive. So for the first example, next slide, please, is from Camden. Camden Council in 2021 put together a resident panel with representatives of Camden communities to co-produce a data charter. And the data charter provides a vision, principle, success criteria, and governance to guide how Camden Council should collect and use personal data, including in the context of AI. You can have a look at it yourself. It's all on their website. There is a lot of principle in the data charter: build trust through transparency, be beneficial for all by using an outcome-based approach, etc., etc. In January 2023, a second resident panel met to review the charter, and they added another principle, which is to ensure that the information Camden Council share about data use is clear and accessible. So the first step to do that is really to produce communication about your use of data, how you collect data, you use data, including in relation to AI, in a way that people can access and understand. So what has Camden done so far? They produce information about the data charter in easy read, which is really good for people with learning disability, but also for people for whom English is not the first language. They also printed information about the data charter that was distributed to libraries and in community space for people who cannot access internet or digital platforms, so people can read information, take that at home. And they're also planning to produce information about the data charter in BSL format for people with hearing impairment, and to translate that in languages spoken across the council. So it's a great first step to communicate in a transparent way that you are using data, you are collecting data, and you are using this data in the context of AI as well. So really the data charter set a vision for the council, and it's co-produced with residents to build trust with community on how the data is used, including in relation to AI. And I wanted to just finish this example to say that when we interviewed Camden Council, we suggested to them that perhaps they wanted to use a resident panel and tailored the resident panel to different AI tech they may want to use. So for example, if they were to use an AI tech that they think may impact more on people from different ethnicity or disabled people, they could create a resident panel with representative of those protected characteristics, and together assess the equality impact of the tech before they start using the tech, and also during the use of the tech to assess the actual impact of the tech. And that's really important to remind people. Thinking about equality and impact is not something you do, you write a paper, you never look at it again. It's a continuing duty. You have to assess the actual impact, and it's really important in relation to AI tech. Next slide, please. The other example I wanted to highlight to you today, I can't share the name of the local authority because we're still working on this one with them. But I can tell you it's an area where 60% of residents have English as a second language. So huge population of people for whom English is not the first language. In 2021, this local authority decided to develop an AI-powered chatbot on its website to automatically respond to resident general inquiry, big collection, council tax, these kind of things. Before the mainstream the chatbot, they piloted it with a customer community panel for a few months, and they collected feedback, which they use as part of assessing the equality impact of solely relying on these new chatbots. Of course, they find out that relying solely on a few chatbots could have a negative impact on people who could not access digital platform or internet, but also people with protected characteristics, older people, people with certain disability, and people for whom English is not the first language. So they put in place mitigating action. And the main one is to retain more traditional methods of communication, face-to-face and telephony. They are currently looking at how they could do more with these chatbots, because at the moment, for example, he responds in English to messages written by residents in whatever language. So they are looking at how the chatbots could respond in more than English in different languages. So that's something they're looking at. They're also looking at piloting a voice recognition AI in the telephone contact center to respond to low priority and non-urgent call. And I'm glad to see that they are going to test that with residents with different accents and language spoken in the borough. I'm just saying that because I have an accent and I am struggling a lot of the time saying, help, human, when I try to deal with such voice recognition AI, does not recognize my French accent. So it's good to see that they are testing it before deciding whether or not to mainstream this AI tech. And also to finish on this example, this local authority is putting system in place to monitor the actual equality impact of the chatbots. So for example, they can look at task completion rates from the chatbots by language use, so they can see whether French people are struggling to get the right information from the chatbots compared to, I don't know, Spanish people, for example, and they can therefore see if the chatbots is as useful as it is for different category of the residents. According to the local authority, using the chatbots is good because it has enabled council officers to focus more of their time to support more vulnerable customers with more complex issue with face-to-face or on the phone. So for them, that's how they see the benefits. And so, as I said, we found a lot of elements of good practice out there, and we're planning to publish that as case study for people to get inspired by or follow us as their own approach. But I just wanted to finish on one slide, which is what happens if you don't think about equality. And that's the example of the Netherlands that I mentioned before. And we had a colleague from the Netherlands Human Rights Commission at our office for several months, and I built this case study with him. So that's how the story goes. Over the last decades, the Dutch tax authority used fraud predictive algorithm to create risk profile and identify childcare benefit frauds. As many as 26,000 parents were wrongly accused by the Dutch tax authority of fraud over a period of 6 years, with as many as 10,000 families forced to repay tens of thousands of euros, in many cases leading to unemployment, bankruptcy, and divorces. Some of the individuals affected contacted the media about this issue, and a parliamentary inquiry was conducted as a result. The inquiry found several grave shortcomings, including institutional biases, administrative courts nearly always accepting the tax authority decision, and the authorities hiding information or misleading Parliament about the facts. So really, really big finding from this inquiry. And then there was another investigation conducted by the Dutch Data Protection Authority that concluded that some of the tax authority methods to detect cases of fraud through automated risk profiling were unlawful and discriminatory. More specifically, the authority found that having dual nationality was marked as a substantial risk factor. Following that scandal, other investigations also found discriminatory indicators for fraud in income tax, like financial contribution to a mosque was a risk factor, or surnames that end in "ik." People from the Balkans will have surname finishing in "ik." So what I'm saying is there was a lot of finding pointing out to race or ethnicity discrimination, just because the risk factor in this piece of AI were by proxy or directly linked to race. So that's why I was saying it's really important to think about equality before and monitor actual impact. So the impact of this case was huge on individual affected, divorce and employment, bankruptcy is huge, but also on the institution. What happened out of this scandal is government had to resign. So big consequence, reputational damage here, and 5 billion euros are set aside in compensation. And there is more inquiries set up to look at this. So it's a continuing scandal case. And I'm just going to finish on that, but I just want to point out it's really, really important for you to consider the equality impact of using AI. Thank you.
That's fab. Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you very much, Ginger, as well. That's a very sobering message to end upon there, the importance of us paying attention and doing it properly. And I think that's the message that we've heard from Welsh Government as well. There is a lot of excitement out there, but let's take a breath, take it calmly, and look at the impact, look at the possibilities. And that's our duty. That's exactly our duty. So that's fantastic. Thank you ever so much. We have lots of questions, so you will be glad to hear. We've got, I think it's about 5 or 6 now. There's a couple come in recently, so I'm just going to read through some of these and offer you the option to come back on those if that's okay, both. So first one up was from Steve. Hello, Steve. Thanks very much. This was a question about the potential benefits of AI. So with all the potential benefits, how can we ensure that it doesn't further impact the digital divide? So those people who are offline or with low skills, separating those from those already engaged in digital. And I should have mentioned, if you have an opinion on this, please feel free to type away in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So I don't know, maybe Ginger, do you want to come in on that one? Any thoughts? The digital divide?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Certainly, I did waffle all around it, sorry. So Stephen's question is, with all the potential benefits to AI, how can we ensure, firstly, it doesn't further impact the digital divide? So those who are offline or with low skills.
Okay, so I would say that you need to read our guidance and follow the steps in our guidance. You need to do a proper assessment of groups of people with different protected characteristics. But I would say in Wales, we have the socioeconomic duty in action as well. So there is a, I'm going to forget the exact way it's worded, but there is a duty under the socioeconomic duty for public bodies, those listed under the socioeconomic duty, to look at the impact of how a particular new policy or change in policy or service or technology, that would include technology, would impact socioeconomic disadvantage. So just, within that, just recognizing that with the digital divide, there are a lot of different factors there. And, income may be one of those factors, but we also know that older people and disabled people may be more impacted by the digital divide. We also do know, interestingly enough, when I left out this SED because just to save time, another project that this is also a project led by the Great Britain compliance team applying to all 3 nations in Wales, and I'm the Wales team representative on this project. We're calling it Digital by Default is the working title, and our aim is to look to see how the move, this is not about AI necessarily, it could be, but how the trend to move services online is impacting maybe those who can't get online. And we do know there's evidence that there will always be a group of people who can't get online. It's not just, I might not be able to get online in 20 years, for a variety, there'll be people who move into and out of that group for a variety of reasons. So sorry, this is a long-winded way. I'll sum up here. I just think that what you do need to do is follow the public sector equality duty, look at what the steps are, seek information from your equalities departments if you need to learn how to do that. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and it's not just artificial intelligence, but it is just generally like whether there are there alternative means for people to get services that maybe have moved online, as well as looking at that impact. And you're absolutely right to think we don't have information necessarily about how some digitally excluded people may be impacted by the technology. Sorry, I don't have a definitive answer for you.
I think that was very comprehensive. Thank you very much, Ginger. It's interesting, that last point. We are the Centre for Digital Public Services. However, we stress the importance of making sure that services are available to all users and not necessarily the digital only. It's definitely not just digital means that are important. So that's fascinating. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. So this is another one from Stephen, who was first in. So thanks, Steve. Second question is, how can we change the narrative around AI to be more positive, helping to remove the trust and fear? And I wonder, Claire, maybe you could come in on this one, given that example of the Netherlands and the negative impact. Have they managed to change people's perspectives on AI yet? Has it come back around to being a bit more positive?
I don't know, but what I would say is our message at the Commission is AI's got benefits and risks, and we always been very data driven at the Commission. We always told public body, you need to collect equality data in order to understand the needs of your residents and to deliver better services. If an AI tech is designed with a good data sets, then that should be at the benefits of residents. I think there's a lot of issue with data sets, even in the real world. If you look at the quality of data sets, it's very rare for me to find information about data gaps. So imagine that your data set is made out only on 30% response rate. You're going to use this data set to train an AI. It's not possibly going to lead to the right outcome. So I think our message is AI could be a great tool to advance your equality work, but you need to make sure you've got the right data set to start with, that you are monitoring the actual impact of using the data, the AI. And I think this approach that we found with lots of public body piloting before deciding or not to mainstream, and some decide not to mainstream. They don't see value for money, or they think that it's a bit, it may lead to unintended consequences, and they decide not to go for it. It is a good one. Pilot it. But definitely the message is got risk and opportunity, and the automation of data, if you've got a good set of data, may help you work upstream with people and prevent bad things from happening, homelessness, financial hardship, and things like that. So I think that's a message we're starting to see out there, and it's definitely our message at the Commission.
Thank you very much. Yes, okay, thank you. Stephen made that point exactly. The people, the data is the crucial bit, and the people potentially not in that data set that trained the AI are those who've decided to not be online, or for various reasons can't be online. So they're not part of the data set, and quite often the most vulnerable. Okay, thank you. So the next question is for me. So this was from a digital skills perspective. I'm happy to take any comments or thoughts on this. From a digital skills perspective, do you see AI impacting on what is currently defined as the basic digital skills the citizens need, given the shift to AI use within employment? That's a really interesting question. So it feels to me like it's a little bit further off than an immediate response needed. AI is in its infancy in that sense. I know we've seen lots of excitement about things like ChatGPT and Bard and so on. But it's not quite at that level where it's in use in everyday jobs that I've seen at the moment. I do think it will become more important. I know I see a lot of people talking about prompt engineering as the new career for youngsters in particular, starting a new role, how to write the proper prompts to get the most out of it. It feels like a bit like debugging a program in the old days. But yeah, I think the other thing I was going to mention is we're also going to see other impacts or other uses for AI that are not just text-based or the typical ones we see now. So things like, I won't say the words because probably set them off, but the voice-activated home assistants, they all know who they are, probably listening in now. But, people will need to be interacting with AIs in different ways to now, I think. So yes, in terms of that, I think it will impact on what's currently defined as basic digital skills. Again, happy for thoughts on this in the chat. Please dive in and type away. I can see lots of messages coming in and comments as we go in, so thank you all. We've got a couple more, if that's okay. So this is a yes or no answer, I think. So do we have a link to information on the common equalities issues or biases for the different types of AI? Any thoughts on that? Not from Claire. Ginger, any thoughts?
Yeah, what I would say is I don't think there's a simple answer to that necessarily, because I think part of the reason is that, and I'm going to ask Claire to comment on my comments here, but I think one of the points made was that these things can play out in very complicated ways, and that's why it's very important for you to have your processes in place and be looking for your own evidence about how whatever technology you're using is impacting your constituency. One thing that I know that there are a lot of esteemed institutions such as the Turing Institute, that are doing research in this area. I could go back and ask our evidence team if they might have any resources they would recommend sharing. But if we were to share a resource, I would want to make sure that it was sort of something that they had a lot of faith in. Claire, what do you think about what I just said?
I haven't come across a table that would be easy to understand, like what type of AI and what sort of risk and opportunity for people. No, I haven't come across that. I can tell you, though, that Manchester City Council, for example, on its website, they created an organization with an integrated care board in Manchester. And they list all the technology-enabled care technology they can provide to people with the benefits for people with learning disability, dementia, etc. They have a video of a carer explaining the benefits of using AI technology in this case, in his father's home. So there is stuff about benefits. The risks, I think are less forthcoming from every side, from the side of the providers, from you know, as I said in the Netherlands example, it took individual to go to the media, and that's a shame, and that's a problem. But a lot of equality duties in Europe are reactive. It's for individuals to seek redress after they experience discrimination. You in Britain, you have a proactive duty. You have an opportunity to do better, to think upstream what sort of risks this policies, this strategies, this technology may pose to equality, and think upstream. So I think you've got the opportunity to think about the risks before individuals reach the media when things are not going right. But no, I'm afraid I haven't come across a simple table on risk and benefits of different AI tech, and I think we fall from that.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So the question was from Joe Cork, and Joe's responded in the chat already, saying thank you for the response. It would be useful to learn from others on early mistakes, if at all possible. So, you know, I think for me the impact of that example at the end in the Netherlands is, you know, very sobering. So things like that would be really useful. I know we've got a hand up from Christian, so I think Mike, who's doing all the whiz kiddery in the background, is going to bring Christian in any second now to ask a question. Hope that's okay with you, Christian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Yeah, so my question is just around what legal mechanisms there are. Firstly, in terms of the Equality Act, I appreciate it's 2011, and it's unfair to have expected to have foreseen this. But what powers, the powers to make regulations and whether regulations could be used, tying in with that, where that the EU legislation, which won't come into force for a couple of years, has nonetheless categorized AI on a risk basis, sort of traffic light system, and also prohibited certain uses, such as use of for facial recognition technology and so on. So yeah, the question is really what legal mechanisms are available to regulate AI.
Yeah, I can take that one. Sorry, I thought I was on mute. Yeah, I'll do my best with that one. Then Claire, you can follow up. So obviously the Equality Act is a legal mechanism, and if a person is discriminated against, that's illegal. If they're all the types of discrimination, direct, indirect, apply. It is complicated to take up discrimination cases, so I've been told. I think, okay, yes, there's also the Data Protection Act, which would apply as well. What I will say about this current government's approach is that they have what we're calling a pro-innovation cross-sectoral approach, and they're expecting different regulators to regulate artificial intelligence and emerging technologies within their own remit. So the EHRC is expected to regulate the equalities remit in relation to emerging technologies. The Information Commissioner's Office is expected to regulate, the Data Protection Act in terms of this. So there is no, within the current government, there aren't any plans currently to bring in new legislation around this or create a new legislature that I'm talking about the proposals in a recent AI white paper they did, and to which EHRC's policy team responded. So I know I have had a read of our response to this white paper, and we agree with their principled approach. They want to have a principled approach and not regulate every single technology as it comes along, because it's just happening too fast. So we need to have principles through which, when new technology comes in, they'll be, folded into these principles. So we agree with that approach, but think that the principles as laid out in the white paper need a much greater emphasis on equality and human rights legal frameworks. Currently, there's a lot of it that falls into the principle that they call fairness And we think that there just needs to be a much greater emphasis on equality and human rights legal frameworks, that though there is reference to transparency and having transparency mechanisms in that paper, that they need to be much stronger than they are laid out in that paper. And that it could be difficult, that in terms of the cross-sectoral regulatory approach, that that regulators might find it challenging to have resources to take on this new remit, and that needs to be thought about, and that it may be difficult for somebody to find redress, you know, within this approach, because there might be a number of different regulators that they might go to. Our policy team and, you know, ourselves at EHRC, we're well aware of the AI EU Act, you know, and the proposals that are in there. But the current government is taking quite a different approach to that, it seems. Anything else, Claire?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Legal powers, simply speaking, you could take a judicial review. In fact, one was taken against South Wales Police in relation to facial recognition. You may want to look at the case. It was around the fact that they didn't do an equality impact assessment and other points. So you could do that. And in fact, at the Commission, we could support cases if it fits with our strategic priorities. And I guess AI would. I mean, it depends on the case, but as Ginger said, it's one of our main focus for the next 3 years, well, now 2. So that's a legal mechanism you can take, individual cases, judicial review. The other things that we could do is what we call a Section 31 assessment, which is a power we have when we think an organization is not complying with the PSED. So we can oblige them to provide us with evidence of the equality consideration, assess PSED compliance, and if we think it's not good enough, we do what we call a Section 23 agreement, where they have to take specific action to comply. We've done that in a number of cases, Home Office, Windrush scandal, these kind of things. So that's another things that can be done. And then Ginger mentioned that we've got inquiries and investigation powers. Inquiries will be around themes, usually a big themes. So it could be the use of AI in public bodies in Wales, and come up with recommendation in relation to that. But we also have the powers to do named investigation. We don't use that very often, but a name investigation is about looking at a specific organization in relation to issues, equality issues we think that they may have. So I guess it's important to communicate to us information about equality issues that you think is happening, because then we can consider what we could do with that. And more information we've got, better. And I will finish by saying that you are no longer part of the EU. It is what it is. As Ginger says, the UK government is taking a different approach. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the Information Commissioner Office. Now, it's quite recent, I think it's 6 months or so. So we are working more closely with them for them to think about data protection and us thinking about equality consideration more jointly. And I don't think the UK government have any plan for an AI regulator. Instead, they want to rely on us and the ICO to do the job. So that's where we are, I think.
Thank you very much. Christian, did you want to come back? Are you happy with the answer? I'm just conscious of time at the moment. We have overrun.
No, just to say, the only thing to add is obviously under the Equality Act, their powers vested separately. It's very important to realise in the Welsh ministers in relation to amplification of the public sector equality duty. So just a point of note. So.
Okay. Right, thank you. We are going to wrap up any moment now. There's been some fascinating conversations in the chat. Much appreciated. It's been lively this morning. It's such an important topic and everybody's really appreciative of your input. So Ginger, Claire, thank you very much. I'm going to move on. So next slide on the screen, please, if that's okay. And we have, if you've got the time just to help us out with our survey here, there's a menti.com link. So please use a mobile device to scan the QR code or head over, as it says, to menti.com and enter the code. And we've got some post-event survey questions, really short, but it's about rating your confidence in the public sector equality duty, which we've heard about today, about the impacts of AI on equality, and any other information. So if you can pop over there for a few minutes, that would be much appreciated. Really helps us steer where we go with webinars. And speaking of what's coming next, so here's a little slide. I swear we were organized and prepared. Look at this. So this is what's coming up from CDPS in the next few months. We've got a couple of things that's worth drawing your attention to. So that we run lunch and learn sessions. They're half an hour long or so lunch times. First one, or next one's on the 23rd of the 10th. This is a dive into how agile teams work, and then followed up with a specific session on how to run agile ceremonies. So if you're interested in that, that's a really lovely way to spend your lunch. You don't have to have your camera on, you don't have to join in or ask any questions, but you can sit and eat and listen to and learn from a lunch and learn. The last point on that screen, though, you'll see is the procuring AI in the public sector. So we've talked a little bit about procurement today. We've just touched on it. We're going to take a deeper dive into that on the 9th of November. So if your interest in AI has been piqued, definitely sign up for that one. All of these are available on our website, on the CDPS website, under events and courses and events. So you'll see that link as soon as you land. So please feel free to sign up. And if you're anything like me now, you've struggled to do two things at once. You've probably tried to do the Menti, and you've listened to me as well, talking over the top of it and being really confused. But I think we're pretty much there now. I can see lots of people saying thank you, and a number of people saying they've got to go. Understandably, it's a bit late. So I think what we'll do is wrap up there. Just want to say thank you to the team in the background doing all the magic on making the webinar work. Thank you ever so much for joining us this morning and contributing so well to the chat. And a massive, massive thank you to EHRC colleagues, Ginger and Claire. Thank you ever so much for your expert input today. We'll stop there. Diolch yn fawr pawb. Thank you very much. Great to see you all, and hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Diolch yn fawr.